Hey, it's good to see you today. My name is Philip Thomas, pastor of Journey here in Elgin, Texas. This is our journey through Scripture, and we are making a big jump today. We are moving from the Old Testament to New Testament. So today we're going to be looking at the first part of John chapter 1, and then Matthew 1 and 2, and Luke 1 and 2. So I encourage you to read those. And this is a very interesting as we talk about kind of what happened at the end of where we were talking about in Daniel, the prophecies, things like that. They're talking about this time of 400 years of silence. You know that the people are under the control. They were under control during that time of Alexander, of the Greeks. And then when Alexander died, you had the Syrians and Egyptians, the Seleucids and the Ptolemies. They kind of each had control at different times of Jerusalem. There was lots of conflict there. Eventually, Rome kind of begins to exert her force in the area. You also have it was in the 140s, 160s BC. You have the revolts of the Maccabees. This is gives the Jerusalem a semi-independence for a little while, for about 100 years. They still there was lots going on and lots of challenges, but they did find a level of independence. And then you have Rome eventually comes in um, during in 63 BC. And that is when King Herod is installed, basically, or a little bit after that, but King Herod is installed by Rome. So now Rome is ruling over Israel. King Herod is kind of Jewish, but most of the Jews don't like him because he's not fully Jewish. They have issues there. It goes back to the exile. They did not like King Herod. And then King Herod is actually about three different people, right? There's King Herod and then his two sons that are all referred to as King Herod. So the King Herod that's at Jesus' birth is not the same King Herod at Jesus' death, but it is the same family. It's the same line. Um, but all of them very brutal, not good kings in any way. And again, it says they were king, but they really weren't. They were under Caesar. This would have been Caesar Augustus at this time, and so you have a lot of political stuff going on. There's the tension between the Sadducees and the Pharisees within the religious priesthood. So that is the place where Jesus is born, of what's going on with Jesus's birth. It's a very tumultuous time, and tensions are rising. Rome just wants to keep everything calm, but there are those who are wanting to get rid of Roman rule. Right, the people wanted to be their own country again. That would impact their understanding of the Messiah, and Jesus would be misunderstood, and as when he proclaims to be the Messiah. So that leads us to the Gospels. We'll look at John, Matthew, and Luke today. All the Gospels, they are not biographies. They are theological um, um, pieces of literature that tell us a whole lot about Jesus' life, but they're really there for a purpose to tell us about his message, more than just a biography of his life. They are certainly trying to convince us and to convince their audience when they were initially written, and to assure them that Jesus is the Messiah, that he is who he said he was. And so as we'll start off looking at John chapter 1, all the way through verse 18. And I love John is definitely a different. While the other gospels, they're called the synoptic gospels, John kind of is more wordy. He tells longer narratives, where the other gospels kind of give short snippets of Jesus's teachings. So John is a little bit different, but his goal is for you to believe in who Jesus is. John 3:16, right? That is his goal, is to have you believe in who Jesus is, and the that he is the Messiah, and that salvation comes through him. So you look at John chapter 1. I love John chapter 1. It talks about, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. So immediately he's saying this man Jesus, he is God. He was with God at the beginning. They are one and the same. Right? And it says, in him was life. That life was the light of men, and the light shines in the darkness. The darkness cannot overcome it or cannot comprehend it. So here, Jesus is bringing a new light into the world, that pushes back the darkness. Continues that Jesus is the true light, that this man came from a witness to bear witness of the light, that all through him might believe. He was not that light, but was sent to bear witness to that light, talking about John the Baptist. That was the true light, which gives light to every man coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, and the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, to those who believe in his name. Again, this emphasis of those who believe, those who believe in who Jesus is. John the Baptist was proclaiming, he was paving that way. Then you have in verse 14, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, right? This is honestly, this is the biggest contention between Judaism today and Christianity. Was Jesus the Messiah? And the most Jews would say that there is no way that God could have flesh, right? That he is separate from that, and he would not literally become one of us. There's a lot of theological differences there and conversations that you could have. But what John is saying is that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. Right. So again, John's birth narrative, if you will, is a theological one of who is this Jesus? Why should we believe in him? And connecting him as the Messiah, Son of God, who was with God from the beginning, that this is God in the flesh, that God was doing something unique. He wasn't just calling a prophet. He was actually entering in to the world. Then you go into Luke. Luke kind of has a start. He's writing. It's kind of either a pseudonym. He's writing to Theophilus. That name Theophilus means lover of God, so it may not have been a individual. It may have been a group of people. It may have been we're grouped into that. But Luke is writing to assure him of the things that he has heard and that they are correct. Verse 3, it seemed good to me also, having had perfect understanding of all things from very first, to write to you an orderly account, most excellent Theophilus, that you may know the certainty of those things in which you were instructed. So this is a person who's heard this, but Luke is giving a more instructive view and understanding of who Jesus is and what he stands for. The rest of Luke chapter 1, you're probably familiar with. It starts off the birth announcement to Zacharias. Zacharias is a small priest, right, from surrounding areas, but it's his opportunity to go into the Holy of Holies and offer sacrifices. And it's at that time that an angel of the Lord tells him that he and his wife are going to bear a son. Very similarly to what we saw with Abraham and Isaac. They are older, and he kind of doubts that, and so he is not able to speak until John is born. And so you have that going on, and then the angel comes to Mary and says, Mary, you're going to have a child. Mary was pledged, which that is basically the same thing as being married. If you wanted to break that pledge, you would have to file for divorce. And that's Joseph. That was what he was thinking about doing, right? Because once you were pledged to be married, it was as if you were married, and so this was a very difficult announcement. But God chooses to call Mary and Joseph to deliver this wonderful child, and he definitely needed to reassure them through an angel of the Lord. That is no doubt. So again, I encourage you to read through that. Then we see Mary visiting Elizabeth. Elizabeth is Zachariah's wife. They are cousins, or John the Baptist, who Zachariah and Elizabeth will have, is a cousin to Jesus. Read through, you can see the song of Mary. You have the birth of John the Baptist, and they're questioning. The people are questioning what his name should be. And when Zacharias writes down his name should be John, his voice returns to him, and then he has a wonderful prophecy in 67 through 80. It says, verse 74, to grant us that we, being delivered from the hand of our enemies, might serve him without fear in holiness and righteousness before him all the days of our life. Verse 79 is to give light to those who sit in darkness and the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace. That John the Baptist is going to be sharing that message that the Messiah is coming. And so then we know that John the Baptist grew and became strong, that he kind of lived out in the deserts, and we'll see more of him later. Matthew chapter 1 starts differently. Starts straight off with a genealogy. Matthew is definitely connecting more Jesus' connection with the Old Testament. And how he is a fulfillment of the prophecies of the Old Testament. We see a lot of that in Matthew. Matthew was clearly, the audience was a very Jewish audience. He is convincing them that Jesus is the Messiah. So you have this list of genealogy. It's interesting. They put in all of the random characters that you may not want to be in your genealogy, right? Maybe the family tries to kind of not talk about that, person. Oh, great granddad John and what he did. We don't really talk about that. Well, this is Jesus' genealogy, and it has all kinds of people in it that did some really bad things, but yet God used them, and they were part of that historical line. It's interesting. There were also 4 women that are specifically mentioned, which is very rare. A genealogy back in that day was nearly always just a list of men. But these were 4 women that were not Jewish. You have Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Uriah's wife. They are all mentioned in there, which is kind of pointing to the fact that Jesus isn't coming just to save the Jewish people, right? He is coming to save the world, that everyone will be extended his grace. Then you get into the virgin birth in Matthew chapter 1, verses 18 through 25. You have the angel coming to Joseph, saying it's okay. Your soon-to-be wife was not unfaithful to you. We see in verse 23 of Matthew chapter 1, it says, behold, the virgin shall be with child and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which is translated God with us. Right? So Joseph does what is right. He seemed to be wanting to do the best thing in a bad situation anyway. And then whenever he gets the reassurance from the vision, he takes Mary as his wife. Luke chapter 2, verses 1 through 20 is the very traditional Christmas story that is, you can watch the Charlie Brown's Christmas, and it is Linus reads 1 through 20 in the Gospel of Luke. So you have the shepherds, you have all these characters in this wonderful story. and none of them make a lot of sense. They are definitely not the characters that would be chosen to for the king of the world to be born to. They're peasants. Do not have influence. They do not have power, but yet God is going to do something amazing through them. Um, Luke 21 through 38 talks about how they take Jesus on the eighth day to the temple to be circumcised. You have Simeon, who God has promised that he would see the Messiah before he dies. I always wonder if Simeon, whenever he saw Jesus and was in awe and worshipped him, a few hours later realized, oh, if I've just seen the Messiah, that means I must be close to the end. But you have their encounter with Simeon, then you have an encounter with Anna, the prophetess, who God allowed to be there and honored this child. And can you imagine how reinforcing that would be to both Mary and Joseph? Not only have they had the shepherds come, but when they go to the temple, this child that they are bringing, who no one knows about, is recognized by complete strangers. It's obvious God was at work there. Matthew chapter 2 talks about the wise men coming in. Again, this is probably about a year down the road or so. The wise men come. They go to Herod, and Herod kind of wants them to tell him where this child is because he is threatened. And they do not report back to Herod, but it actually kind of alerts everything. Joseph and Mary now know that there's a problem, and they're warned in a vision they need to flee to Egypt. You have Herod that put to death many of the children there in Jerusalem because he again was threatened by, threatened. His power was threatened. Whenever you hear that the king of the Jews is being born, he didn't like that, and so he did have some people killed. There's lots of debate on all of that, but Herod was a horrible person. We have numerous documented things about some of the horrific things that he did. So this is not out of character for him. So we'll go ahead and get finished with both these chapters. The Gospels don't spend a lot of time developing Jesus's life up until he begins his ministry. So it's very short. In Matthew, the end of Matthew, it said that once Herod died, so that's the first King Herod, they returned and went to Nazareth. So they leave Egypt, they come back to Nazareth. Luke has one story about Jesus in verse 41 through 52 about how they go to Jerusalem for one of the festivals for Passover, and they start leaving, heading back to Nazareth. Jesus isn't there. They go back and they find him in the temple where he is learning and he is teaching and he is doing some pretty amazing things for a 12-year-old. And he says in verse 49, "Why did you seek me? Did you not know that I must be about my Father's business?" But they did not understand that statement when he spoke to them. And then the conclusion of chapter 2 is, then he went down with them and came to Nazareth, was subject to them, but his mother kept all these things in her heart, just like we saw when she was in the manger scene, right? That she pondered all of these things in her heart. And Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. So that introduces us to the most transformative character in all of Scripture and in all of human history. And now we will begin looking at Jesus's life and his ministry through the four gospel messages, and we'll be combining them. Let's read Matthew chapter 3, Mark chapter 1, Luke chapter 3, and the rest of John chapter 1. Let's see. So yeah, all of Luke chapter 3, Matthew chapter 3, all of Mark chapter 1, and all of John chapter 1. So basically we'll go another chapter, 3 in Matthew, 3 in Luke, all of John chapter 1, and all of Mark chapter 1. All right, we will see you on